Certification of closed session. Use of closed session, Ms. Armstrong?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Rittenhouse?
Yes.
Ms. Washington?
Yes. There are actions coming out of closed session.
Yes, please. I'd ask the board's approval. The board's approval of student case 3A as discussed in closed session.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
I would ask the board's approval for student case 3B as discussed in closed session.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
I would ask the board's approval for student case 3C as discussed in closed session.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
And the final, I would ask board's approval for student case 3D as discussed in closed session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Adoption of the agenda. I know there's some amendments we need to make.
Right, I would ask that under reports, if we could add the CenturyLink Pantera easement, and I would have Mr. Gifford speak to that particular document.
Okay, so we're adding H to reports.
And then consequently, I would need to add an action item D, approval of the CenturyLink Pantera easement. And so that would be action item D, or letter D, excuse me.
Any others?
Copy for all.
Any other changes to the agenda? If not, we need a motion to accept the amended agenda.
I move we accept the agenda as presented, as amended.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. On to the consent agenda.
Ms. Washington, Mr. Kozan is here this evening. I know that the Blue Ridge Virtual Governor School class trip is on the consent, but if the board is interested in any information related to that trip, I believe he's here to speak to that. He is. He's here to speak to that.
Yes,
Need me up?
yes,
Hey, Ms.
please.
Morrison, please.
Oh, and Mr. Morris. Thank you.
I apologize for the rest of it.
Yeah.
I didn't realize. Coach Moore changed
Is the board involved?
Yeah.
Ooh, this is going to be
Good evening. Matt Morrison, Jimmy Kozan. We're sponsoring a trip to Europe, Spain, and Italy. This is a governor's school trip for the most part, although we did open it up to my students, I guess midway through, about in October, I guess, because we weren't getting quite the numbers we wanted, so we opened it up to a few more students. But we have 19 students from the county, 1 student from Albemarle County, and 9 adults going on the trip. It's from June 11th, which is a bit of a change from the form that we had submitted. One day. The original dates we had set were June 10th to the 19th, but the tour company always, you have to be a little flexible with them. So our flight's going to be out. We're confirmed now for June 11th through the 20th. We fly into Madrid. We go to Zaragoza, Barcelona, Rome, Toledo, and just found out today actually that we have another side trip that we can do to a little ancient town right outside of Rome called Ostia Antica. So we have requested a school bus to take us from the high school to the airport in Richmond. Other than that, and to pick us up and bring us back, obviously. Other than that, do you have any questions that we should answer? Or?
Yes, we'll all go.
I'm just curious, how many of your students speak Spanish or Italian?
That's probably 0, but no, we got
About 6 or 7 have
Excellent.
a bit of Spanish.
Very, very good.
I had the opportunity to take this trip with a group from the high school a few years back when my granddaughter was in high school when she graduated. We went to Italy for 10 days. We flew into Madrid. Awesome adventure. I just loved it. I'm sure it
Yeah.
was a wonderful experience for these children.
This is the third trip I've been able to do with, that I've led with Fluvanna. I've also been on two with a colleague of mine in Louisa County, so. I've never been to Spain before, so I'm looking forward to that. This, he talked me into Spain, actually.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for putting this together and giving our students these opportunities. Thank you. And I do know that there is one change in the consent agenda for the college tour. The dates have changed to April 17th and 18th. I believe the packet said sometime in March, but those dates have changed.
And I would like to let the board know that Mr. Lee from the high school is going to present in April at a board meeting about this particular initiative where he's worked really closely with other staff helping minority children get onto college campuses and work to, build that type of, I would say, excitement about life after high school. So I'm excited. I met with Mr. Lee and Mr. Barlow just last week, and very, very, very pleased with what they're doing, and we look to extending that to the middle school level next year as well. So he'll be here in April to present.
Okay. Any other information that needs to be brought before the board with the consent agenda prior to asking for a motion?
Yes, I have a question, Camilla. At different times, I have questions about expense reports. Is it possible that maybe the rest of the board would even want to look at them sometime, maybe on a monthly basis? Not, everything on there, but certainly the expenses as far as, paying over to vendors.
What I would suggest, if there are items in the consent agenda that you have questions regarding, if you could, when you're reviewing your packet, pull that information together and send it to the board and Ms. Keller in an email, so that when we do come to our board meeting at the point of the consent agenda, we can pull those items and there could be some explanation put there. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, anything else before calling for a motion on the consent agenda? No, we need a motion to approve as discussed.
So move.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We are in our first round of public comments. Anyone who wishes to address the school board must state their name and address and limit their comments to 3 minutes only. This is a time for comments only. Questions should be submitted to the school board in writing and will be given to the appropriate person to answer as soon as possible. The only person that has signed up is Perry Johnson.
My name is Perry Johnson. I live at 5039 James Madison Highway in Fort Union. I am speaking tonight as president of the Fluvanna Education Association. Thank you for taking time tonight to hear the results of the Focus on Fluvanna FEA staff survey. The very good news about this effort to give a voice to teachers and staff is that we all have the same objective, to provide the best education for the children of Fluvanna. More good news is that you have an engaged community, including all stakeholders, and working to make specific recommendations for improvement. Also very good news is that you have intelligent and talented teachers, so confident in their expertise and so mindful of their students' needs that they're eager for any opportunity to be fully included in school decisions. My hope is that after Mr. Sullivan's presentation, while many stakeholders are represented here tonight, you'll be willing to share your reaction and level of commitment to a plan of improvement. Please take this evening's opportunity to publicly continue the conversation most of you started with Mr. Sullivan, a discussion that has such potential to move Fluvanna schools forward. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to address the board? Not, first round of public comment is closed. recognitions. Ask the board to join me out in front of the page. Mr. Stay.
How are y'all doing? I'm going to recognize 5 folks tonight. I'm not sure if everybody's here. I know that some have previous commitments. I'm going to call 5 teachers up and talk about them. Let's start with Mr. Heritage, Ms. Gillum, Ms. Scruggs, Mr. Schrader, and Mr. Verbo. So I'm definitely to be here this evening. Give them a minute to come down. Just down with Mr. Schrader. I'm going to try not to embarrass them. Try not to, but they know me so well, probably.
Have you stand on there, you're going to come down the line and shake hands?
Mind if I say something?
No, please do.
So, everybody that's here tonight, and really, I've said this to the board before, I'm very blessed at the middle school to have a group of teachers that do the committee. And everybody works really hard, but there are some folks that just go above and beyond what they do each and every day. Mr. Heritage, from the first day I got there and met with him over the summer, and I met with a lot of teachers over the summer when I started, he has been very involved in our RTI program, which is response intervention, helping struggling students. You can find him not only going to RTI meetings after school, he takes his planning period to help other students and other teachers and other grade levels. Takes time out during the lunch to help mentor and help students, which is pretty awesome. He's also part of our Positive Behavior Intervention Committee. He's very instrumental with that, so we're really appreciative of just the above and beyond that he does. I want to publicly acknowledge him. Ms. Gillum and Ms. Scruggs, who are both 6th grade teachers, also serve help with RTI. They serve many students in that capacity. They're also members of the Positive Behavior Committee helping our students. And the other thing that has been so fortunate, they volunteered for this first thing this summer when I got there, and it was one of my first calls to say, can I get you to do something for me? Without even meeting them, which is very gracious that they offer to be part of our PLC leadership group, which is a cohort that meets with other counties in the area, and they have been instrumental in being leaders in that. Also, they bring back professional development and share often with math and language art respectively, so I'm very appreciative of what they do. Coach Schrader, who's not here this evening, he is a member of PBIS as well. It sounds like a PBIS love fest, but we love positive behavior at the middle school, so that's why they're up here. He also does a lot of our adaptive physical education classes, reaching out and helping students to get the access that they need. And then Mr. Verbos got 2 grants, one from PTO to do a hydroponics garden, which he has set up outside his classroom, which we hope to move to the office very soon, and he's even talked about somehow putting fish in there. I'm not sure how it's going to work, but I trust him. He's also going to start a garden with his 5th grade class. He got a grant from the Farm Bureau, I believe. So after spring break, we'll be getting that project started. But just really wanted to thank some folks for the dedication that they do above and beyond each and every day. So thank you guys.
Mr. Stribling.
Yes,
Harrisburg.
absolutely. Good evening, everyone. We've got some recognitions that we're actually going to recognize some students tonight. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Valentine.
We've been doing, good evening, we've been doing with our PBIS as well, a program called Check In, Check Out. 4 teachers, one of whom is in the audience, Ms. Farley, and 3 others went to a training and came back all excited about a program and decided to put it into place. It was called Check In, Check Out. And basically it's promoting our positive expectations. And out of the 10 initial students in the program, I would like my Check In, Check Out students to stand up. All right, Miss Courtney Wilkins, Mr. Christian Farley, Mr. Ben Salton, and Mr. Alex Palmer. Can the four of you please come up this way? All right. Yes, thank you. Sorry guys, that light's right in our eyes. Come back here just a minute. Okay, you stand right there. All right, and I have Ben. Ben is one of my fourth graders. Alex is, our fourth graders. And Courtney is one of our fourth graders, and so they are coming to Mr. Stang ready to go. Christian we get to keep for another year. He's one of our third graders. And so I have a certificate to present to you. We are so very proud of everything that you've done. Can you tell everyone who your check-in person is? Can you tell them their name? Who do you check in with?
My name is Christian Plotty, and I check in with Miss Potato.
All right, right there with Mr. Strickland. Ben, can you tell everyone who you check in with?
My check-in check-out person is Miss Morrison.
All right. Congratulations, Ben. Alex, can you tell them who your check-in check-out person is?
My name is Alex, and my check-in check-out person is Miss Farley. I mean, that's my teacher, but you and
Miss Courtney, you ready?
my check-in check-out person is Miss Kerr.
Tell her name.
My name is Courtney Wilkins.
Congratulations, ladies and gentlemen. We have one student who's at basketball tryouts tonight. Quentin Spellman could not be here this evening unless he showed up after practice, so I don't think so. So congratulations to these 5 students. We're very, very proud of them. Thank you. Thank you. Miss Lee.
So before we give out the next round of recognitions, I want to just share with you all, some of you all got to see these young people on the news, which has been really exciting, on the newspaper. This school year, at the beginning of the school year, in a previous place that I worked, we participated, our students did, in the Medford League basketball team. And what it is, it's a special league basketball team for special needs students. And so when I came here, I had the idea to bring it here. So I told Mrs. Keller, my coach friend, thank you for the go ahead, to start the league here. But I talked to one of our teachers and I said, Mr. Ward, this is what I want to do for the students. He's like, okay, that's great. Took the idea and really ran with it. And I can tell you that our students at the high school who participated this school year have had such a sense of pride, a sense of belongingness. I'm just excited when they get off the bus when they have a basketball game. We have a game today. Our last game was today. We didn't pull off the win, but that's okay. They played really hard. So we're just really proud of them. And this is our first year in the league. We're excited. We're going to continue. We're going to practice in our off season until next season, until we start again. So it's just really exciting. In the middle school, we talk to them about how can we start conditioning and preparing for the high school. So the students are just really excited to be a part of this and be a part of something. So we're going to recognize a lot of them are here tonight, a lot of teachers. And so if we forget any names, if you participated, please forgive us. We're thankful for everything that everyone has done. Thank you, and staff. Some other people participated. So we're going to start by calling the names, and a lot of our people here. I think Tyler's here. The first person, Tyler Bachman. Tyler Brumbaugh. I see you out there.
Oh, yeah?
Come on down here, meet me, Tyler.
What make me say funny things?
There you go.
Hey, don't touch me.
Good job.
Good job, buddy.
Melissa Colburn.
Good picture of him. Mr. Leach is
Proud of you, Tyler.
watching you, buddy. We love Mr. Leach.
Deanna Feathers. Meredith Haygood. Tantika Hawkins. Akira Henderson. Shay Hill. Justin Jackson. Justin. DW. DW Kirby. Layla. Deshana. Deshana Roberts. Anthony Walker. Aaron Feathers. Amy McCullough.
Mr. Ward, Ms. Feathers is getting your certificate.
That's fine.
That's right. That's right. She's going to hold that for you, and then we'll make sure she gets hers by next week.
She's fine.
There you go.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you. Peter Mance. Peter. Good job, Peter. Mr. Peak. Miss Adams, Dorothy Adams. Dolores Palmer. Miss Palmer. Miss Scarborough. Okay. Mr. Lee. Morgan Simmers. Morgan. And Katie Stutz. I did spell it right. I love you anyway. Get it right. 3 minutes. So, just another round of applause. Thank you all very much.
On behalf of the parents of these players, you've given these kids an opportunity to do something that, of course, they're normally developing peers have been able to enjoy, and it's just been a really special opportunity that you all have given them. Thank you very much.
So, March 2nd through the 6th is School Social Worker Recognition Week, and she's not here. Susan Daly, I mean, talk about an employee who puts in hours and hours of work, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and does it for her passion and love for children. So we want to take this opportunity to recognize her, and we want to clone her and have 5 more in our schools, but just to say thank you for all she does. So thank you.
Went to loosen it and went like
Is it on there?
yeah, I went to loosen it to move it and it went straight up. I was down 1, 2.
Like 7, I'll switch. 30 minutes, don't go over time.
Stepping off.
Next on our agenda is delegation focused on Fluvanna FBA survey. Mr. Sullivan.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come up here and speak with you today. I had the fortunate chance to speak with
Hold on just 1 second, I'm sorry. Can someone in the back please shut the doors for us? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. For those of you who don't know, I think most of you do know, us Focus on Fluvanna's Future was created about 3 years ago with the objective of trying to help get our community informed and engaged on important issues in the community. Schools being one of the first priorities that we started focusing on. I think we've kept with that passion. I'd like to share with you some results of a recent school staff survey that we did with school staff. You know, we've heard there's a lot of desire for teachers and staff to be able to have their voice heard. And I think, you know, the objective of the survey was to be able to provide that message and give them that voice and to be able to provide that on a regular basis with the community, but also with the school board. So we go to the next slide. So the overall objective was to provide an independent approach towards tracking survey results, to be able to do it on a regular basis. So, you know, I know there's a current employee survey that happens once a year, but often that's not enough to be able to really see how things are moving, to see what kind of progress is being made. So our goal was to try to be able to, at a very high level, assess where things are from a temperature check, and then on a more regular basis, start to see how that's evolving over time, because then we can identify where the opportunities may exist and what's working and what should continue and what new things could be added. But more importantly with the survey, we were very much focused on recommendations and solutions. So what are the opportunities? What are the things that teachers can be doing? What are the things and the support that staff needs in terms of an administration, as well as from a school board perspective? And I think there's some really good insights and perspectives coming from the survey. In general, what we did was we linked up with Ms. Johnson and the FEA to be able to get access to their distribution list for school staff, and opened it up to anyone who wanted to participate. We did ask people to go through the FEA to be able to complete the survey to make sure that we didn't have non-school staff members completing it. But once the surveys were completed, they were completely anonymous. Nobody knew who was what. And I think overall, the survey was live for 7 days. We've posted the results, the high-level results of the survey, and I'm going to look forward to walking through a couple of those results today. Just in terms of the sample size, and really happy with the sample size we had. As you can see, we had a slightly higher sample size than the May survey done by the schools last year. And most of them were classroom teachers, 83% were classroom teachers, and a really good mix between the 4 schools. We combined Central, the 2 schools over at Central, just because there's so few classes there. We didn't want to have to, if there were a small sample size, we didn't want, people were concerned about being able to identify individuals who complete the survey. But generally speaking, you're looking about a quarter in the Central, a quarter in the high school, slightly more in the middle school, and not surprising, Carriesbrook had the lower sample size since they only had 2 classes in that school. So I think one of the things that's really important to note before getting into the findings is, while it's a good sample size, while we've got some good quantitative data in terms of what the results were, both in terms of the 7 areas as well as at a school level, these are comments and their descriptions, and it's a conglomeration of what teachers have said. So whether every single statement made in the survey comments is a direct fact, or it's a partial fact, or it's an opinion, what's really important is we found general trends that exist within the schools and within the staff. And I think anytime you have a perception that is at a significant portion of a population, that perception becomes reality in many cases. And I think one of the findings that we found through the survey is it's not so much that there's not a lot of things in place, it's just the lack of communication or the trust and the confidence through a series of reasons in terms of where that may be. But I think the good news with that is it doesn't necessarily mean there's a lot of financial things that are required to help fix it. It's just around trying to build some of those gaps, bridge some of those gaps. So we get into the specific survey results. Some of the key findings that we had. First, overwhelmingly, we got a lot of support, and a lot of vocal support from the staff saying we really appreciate giving us the opportunity to speak up in an independent manner. I think there were some concerns, which I'll talk about later, in terms of trying to understand how their voice is heard, and when they complete surveys, what's done on the back of that, and being able to see the results. So I think they really appreciate having the opportunity to speak, but then also being able to see the results and hopefully see some actions coming on the back of it. I think there's a common theme, not surprising. They're still being challenged by some of the economic environment we're in terms of the budget constraints and the state unfunded mandates. The culture of testing that's being pushed down to the federal and state level is certainly having an impact, and I think there's no question they're noticing it, but they're still fighting through it, and I think it's amazing what they're able to do despite that. I think as I mentioned before, I think one of the big challenges is around communication. I think that's one of the big themes that we saw in the findings that I think could really go a long way in terms of addressing some challenges. And again, the big thing is around it's not all funding. It really is. There are things that can be done that don't require money, which is oops, went too far. So if we look at the overall results, the first slide I'm going to share with you is we had a scale of 1 to 7 for 7 questions. So we had strongly agree, somewhat agree, neutral, somewhat disagree, strongly disagree. We've only shown the strongly agree on the positive side and the strongly disagree on the left side. Typically, in running surveys, your neutral responses of neutral and somewhat aren't very strong responses in terms of where they are. So we wanted to focus on the extreme ends on both sides. And I think I don't want to sugarcoat the results. I think anytime you're looking at an average strongly agree at 16%, that's certainly lower than you would hope it to be. I typically, when we run our surveys in the business world, we're looking for 60 to 70%, on the strongly agree. So I think there's certainly some opportunities, that could be addressed. And I think it's around the perception that exists that drives people to answer the way they do in the surveys. And it's not necessarily that things aren't in place and that things aren't happening, it's the perception of where that is. I think some of the challenges is not surprising. You see the budget has the most negative results. And, given the environment over the last couple of years and the salaries being frozen and classroom funding coming out and investments in technology not being able to happen, I think it's not a surprise that budget's been a challenge there, or a challenge. I think also, instructional autonomy, that's another situation where, the system is limited to a certain extent in terms of the state mandates on SOLs and testing, and there are certain things that really do limit what an administration can do to address that. I think the message that we heard was an acknowledgement of that, but are there ways to adapt within those constraints and find creative ways to get around that instructional autonomy where you can really leverage the expertise of the teachers in the classroom to be able to still meet those SOL needs and still meet those mandates while being able to leverage the expertise of teachers. In terms of some of the areas that I think are big opportunities, I think the two that stood out for me are the feedback and input and the leadership. And I think this gets back to some of the feedback we've heard certainly around previous surveys around feedback and input is I believe the administration is transparent in their decision-making process, and my opinions can be heard and considered in a risk-free environment. That's a really important element for staff to feel comfortable in the work environment there. And I think sometimes what happens is there just gets disconnect between different levels in the organization, which creates some of those results. I think it's not necessarily not fixable. It's not fixable in a short period, but I think it's something to at least recognize kind of where that is. And then similarly, on a leadership perspective, related directly to this board, is around it's a belief and a perception that the board has a clear and actionable multi-year strategic vision and a roadmap for Fluvanna schools. And I think the fact that some of the staff doesn't say that, it may be an information perspective, it may be a perception, but the fact that those numbers are low, I think it's worth at least acknowledging. But I think the positive note, which I'll show on the next slide, is despite that, if we look on the next slide on satisfaction, generally speaking, the highest scores were on satisfaction. So, we did see more of a neutral response on satisfaction, and the comments related to that were, we love our kids, we love our profession, we're in this because we're passionate for it, we like working with our peers, despite all the challenges that we're facing. And I think that speaks up in terms of, if you look at where we are in funding in schools compared to surrounding communities, the fact that we have the results that we do is a direct result of the amazing teachers and the staff that we have in the school system. So I think that's a big point. And I think you see some varying degrees, and I don't want to go into too much detail on each one, but different schools had different results. I think effective use of time was one that stood out for Central, and then the budget one at the middle school. And generally speaking, we did see at the high school slightly more positive responses than, say, some of the other schools. So again, I'll let you read through those, and I think the general message is, the goal will be to try to start seeing that shift towards the middle and into the green in terms of those individual responses. And it's not about the exact number, but it's about seeing the trending, how that trending starts to evolve. So just in terms of some of the common themes that we heard, and I think I'll go back to the caveat that I mentioned before. Don't take every one of these statements as every teacher saying that. It was we saw multiple comments on these topics, and I think some of the common ones we identified were certainly, when we think about curriculum, STEM came up. Almost everyone who made comments on curriculum, there were concerns around STEM and trying to find ways and understanding what the strategy is. I think the good news was with the grant coming in and some of the activities in places, it seems like that's already starting to be addressed. The gifted program was also a challenge that was identified. Some of the other themes which came through was technology and the ability to have that technology to enhance the experience and the education of students in the classroom. I know there's certainly some initiatives underway there, but I think that was one that certainly popped out. And then when it gets to the feedback and input, I think that's also, as I mentioned before, being able to feel like your voice matters. There was a lot of comments around the fact that the survey was done in May last year, and they didn't really see the results or what the outcomes were of that. And I know, in speaking with many of you, there were action plans that were put in place, but I think a lot of the staff didn't necessarily feel that they saw that and that there was a lot of reaction coming from. So I think there's some opportunities around communications and around engagement. And I'll certainly let you read through some of those later on, but those are some of the overarching themes that we identified. And then the last step, again, trying to be proactive and trying to identify opportunities, came up with some questions related to some of the identified opportunities that we saw. So, things that they'd like to have the school board and the administration asking that can maybe help get towards some of the solutions. So, what districts do you see, and do you think we should be mirroring for? What are the STEM programs? What is the gifted program? How many of you, when it comes to the budget, how much of a fight is going in terms of really trying to push the Board of Supervisors to understand what the situation is with the budget? What specific actions have been taken out of the school surveys? Additionally, on the feedback and input, I think there was a perception that's kind of cascaded through a portion of the staff around not feeling comfortable speaking up, either not feeling comfortable or not feeling that the voice was being heard. And I think a lot of that has to do with our own communication, because certainly, at least in speaking with many members of the administration of the school board, I think there's a feeling that there is an openness and there's a desire to listen and to respond. But I think the fact that there's that disconnect right now shows that maybe there's some additional opportunities to address some of those challenges as well. And again, I don't want to go through all of these, and I think the real message that we heard is the staff wants to speak up, the staff's engaged, they're excited, that they're really passionate about what they want to do, and they just want to be heard, and they want to be acknowledged that in these challenging times that they have the ability to kind of influence how things are moving forward, and that they believe that they have some really good, valuable insights and input that can really help things move forward in a positive and constructive way. So those were the key messages from the survey. I think, again, the closing comments on that are, it's really impressive to see how strong the teachers have done given the environment. We believe there's great opportunities for the school board to help give a voice to the teachers and the staff. Teachers are willing to come forward and share recommendations and be engaged. And a lot of these recommendations don't require any funding or any additional budget from you. And I think a lot of those themes that don't require that budget is around communications, around trust, around respect. And I think they're just looking for that acknowledgement that their voice matters, and that there's an engagement and acknowledgement of where they are and what they want to do in terms of moving forward. So those are the overarching results of the survey. I know I ran through them very quickly, and I apologize for that. But if you have any questions later on in terms of some of the specifics, happy to do that. One of the things I wanted to take 30 seconds to go through a couple of quick slides. One of the overarching messages that came out of the survey was a feeling that that the school board or leadership wasn't fighting for the budget. And I know, having spoken with most of you and most of the administration, I know that may not necessarily resonate. And I think the message, I think, would be I think they want to see that push and that desire to show not only what we're doing, but to start to see maybe a message that helps identify where the school budget is. And what we did was we put together a couple slides for you that I think a lot of the community may be surprised at when they actually see some of these school funding budgets. So the first one is, if you look at from 2009 to 2015, many people have talked about the schools resulting in our high tax rates, and so much money is being spent on the school and one is enough. And I think if you look at the results, 2015 budget that was allocated is less than what the 2009 budget was in terms of local funding. I think that's a really important number. I mean, we as a community are spending less on our schools and local funding now than we were in 2009. And on top of that, we've lost almost $3 million from the state and federal money. So we're 8% below where we were in 2009. The second one is around, everyone will say, well, your populations in the schools are going down, so that's why you're losing your funding. But as you can see here, the funding decrease is substantially greater than the actual student population. So, as of 2012, we were about 2% more ADM than we were in 2009, and yet the budget was 11% below. And I think it's not a surprise that when you see school slashed, budget slashed, student population starts to go down because people start pulling their kids out for homeschooling or for private school, or they just move away from the community. So I think, I'm not saying that's the only reason why ADM decided to decline, but I think there's certainly an impact in terms of schools create one of the reasons why you want to be in the community. This slide, personally, I think every person in Fluvanna should be embarrassed about this slide. And I think this is the one that disturbs me the most. If you look on the x-axis, it's the per pupil expenditure. And so you go from the lowest to the highest. Right now, out of 132 school districts in the state, there's only 12 school districts that spend less money per student than Fluvanna. And then when you look at the class size in K through 7, there's only 6 school districts that have a higher class size in K through 7 than Fluvanna in the state of Virginia. And if you look at what happened when those budgets were cut from 2011 to 2013, you saw a 20% increase in the ADM in that. So I think this is an area when we talk about how much money we're spending, and we're spending too much money on schools, I think it's pretty clear compared to where we are for Virginia and the local community, we are still quite low. And despite that, we're doing amazing things in the classroom. The teachers are really doing a lot. And, I think I don't need to say much in terms of the teachers here, but, with budget constraints come, salary constraints. And, as of right now, most teachers in the classroom are making less than they were in 2009. That's gross. That doesn't impact any of the net elements that happen. And then the last one, or the second to last one, again, it relates to how much the school costs versus the rest. You'll see from 2010 to 2015, the county contribution to the schools is only 2% more than it was in 2010, but the all non-school, non-debt related costs are 18% higher than we were in 2010. So I think, for me, for someone who values education in the community, it gets very frustrating hearing people talk about the schools adding costs to the tax rate. The reality is the county's adding a lot of costs, and understandably so. Those are costs that need to be made. There was investments that were passed down in terms of emergency services, in terms of infrastructure. So it's not that number's bad. It's just, relatively speaking, the increase hasn't been as much as many people may believe. And then lastly, and then it's the last slide, I promise, is there's a lot of talk about our tax rate, and there's no question our tax rate's going up, and there's no question our taxes are going up. And that's a concern. I think for individuals in the community that have a fixed income that's challenging. I said, but despite the fact that we have one of the highest tax rates, we're actually right in the middle of Central Virginia in terms of how much money we're spending on taxes. So the average tax that the median homeowner spends in taxes today is $1,000 less than what Albemarle pays. So when you hear people, and even community members and elected officials say our tax rate's way above Albemarle, people aren't going to move here, when you look at a listing sheet, you don't see the tax rate on the listing sheet. You actually see the dollars and taxes that you're paying. And I think it's really important for the community to understand when we're getting behind and making tough decisions around where, in a limited budget, where is money being spent. It's important to make sure we're at least talking about the facts. So I think, from folks on Fluvanna's future and speaking about the community, please make sure you're making those cases public and that you're helping the Board of Supervisors understand that. And we all as a community need to be doing that. So thank you so much. Really appreciate the time. I probably went a little bit over and I apologize. I probably spoke a little too fast. But again, thank you. I think the teachers really appreciate and the staff really appreciate the opportunity to have their voice heard. And I really appreciate taking the time to let me speak. So thank you.
Thank you. Comments from the school board on the presentation? I'm going to go last, so somebody else.
Well, I could start with just a couple of questions. One is the total sample that's possible. I think it's pertinent to both of the surveys. What is the total number, Mr. Sullivan?
In terms of the potential?
The potential sample that you could use for this.
I think it was probably, there's around 550 is the total school staff size. Is that right? Somewhere around there? 520. And then about 350 in terms of instructional?
I'll ask Ed. That changes about it. Instructional staff.
I'm sorry.
There are approximately 270 PA in the teacher's school.
But all instructional staff and instructional aides, it's over 300.
There were 60 instructional, 50 instructional.
350.
It was 220 classrooms. We probably had about 125. So we hit about 50% of classroom teachers with that survey then. It was 83% of 147.
Well, I think it's been a point of frustration for even us with our survey that it is voluntary. People are free to choose not to. And unfortunately, we have no access to those people who have chosen not to. We don't know where they're coming from. We don't know if they're super happy or so, disillusioned with all this.
Yeah, I think if I can speak with confidence. If people feel like their voice is being heard, I think those sample sizes are going to go up very, very quickly.
Mr. Sullivan, can you come back up to the podium while the board is addressing you with your presentation? Thank you.
I'm sorry. Yeah, so I think if staff feels like their voice is being heard, I think those sample sizes will go up significantly. I think they were up a lot higher. If you look at the school staff surveys, they were quite high 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
I guess I'd be curious, since we're talking about perception, which is certainly a nebulous term. It's whatever someone perceives it to be sometimes. But what is, just give me one or two concrete examples of what they would see as proof that they have been listened to and heard.
I think one is just an acknowledgement of some of the challenges that they face. I think, one of the comments that we heard a lot was, and it's just on the two, if you take a look at the last two surveys that were done by the schools, I think it was 2 years ago, the survey was done and you asked their recommendations on where would they cut in the budget, and what are the things you would prioritize. And I think one of the challenges comes when you ask people that, they're thinking that you're going to listen to it, and the reality is, I understand why those decisions were made, but the perception that you come and ask us something and then you do the exact opposite, that's a turning point. And then I think this survey came through in May, it was completed in May, and then normally it's released, I think, in the summer. It wasn't released until November, and it was done during a working session when the teachers were in school. So I think they weren't there during those sessions. So I think being able to hear the results of the surveys, your perception or questions that you may have around what do these surveys mean? Because I think the survey results that came from your survey were not significantly different than where ours were, at least directionally. So I think there are some of the things we identified that were similar to what we identified, in that. So I think just being able to hear some acknowledgements of, we see these survey results, here are things we think we can address, here are things we think we can't. I mean, at the end of the day, people voice in surveys what they want and what they think, and in many cases, there's structures that you can't implement and that you can't change. I think the question is trying to identify what are those things that can be influenced, where you can bring them along. So I think that would probably be one, is just feeling like when they provide their recommendations or thoughts, that there's some kind of feedback mechanism for that.
And I think on that point, I would certainly applaud the approach that I hear you taking with this, which is to not just look for the things that are deemed to be wrong, negative, but balancing that with what are the positive things that could be done. And I certainly like the approach of, if you've got something negative to say, provide some resolution to this whole thing. That said, I do think it is a fallacy to imagine that because the suggestion is given, that it's automatically going to be. I mean, listening is one thing. Listening to implementation requires processing in between. And that is certainly a lot of what we do here in Florida. The other question that I would have, and I know you can't answer it, so this is probably more rhetorical, but I think as a board we feel that communication is very important to us as well. We have many public meetings, not just school board meetings, but we also have seminars and other specially called meetings that are 9 times out of 10 open and available to the public. And all of these things are creating a written record. And all of this is available, or the majority of it, on the internet, on our website. So my question would be, how many of the people that have submitted this, and in particular, made a comment about lack of communication, have actually read through that and tried to understand it? And I can tell you it's not easy to do, because that's really what our job is right here.
Sure.
But that I would consider to be, I consider fact to be data, to be something tangible, certainly much more so than perception. And I would hope that before we even try to move forward in any positive direction, that basing whatever we're doing on what is the actual fact and what is the data that we have would be the foundation on which we build that. And I think that is something that the population as a whole should be made aware of.
Yeah, I think I'll admit, some of my frustrations in the process. The reason why we ended up going this route is it's very hard to put a finger on what the real challenges are when you ask. And I think, and whether it's an excuse or whether it's reality, you hear a lot of, I can't talk about this because if this comes back to me, I'm going to get in trouble. And I think not that that's I'm not saying that that's the reality, but if it gets to the point where you start to have a breakdown in communication, those misperceptions start to snowball. And, you know, the objective of what we were thinking, and you know, my background is in consulting and change management. And, you know, there's a lot of things we do in terms of working with CXOs, in terms of helping. It doesn't matter how good your vision is and what your plan is and what your strategy is and all the things you put in place. It's how you actually engage at the ground level and how you drive change. And most people fail at that engagement level. That's not a surprise in terms of where things are. So the reason why we did this was survey was phase one. The next stage, what we're doing is we're organizing. We've got 8 or 9 teachers who agreed to organize focus groups and be a leader of a focus group to bring people together to not complain, but to translate the survey results, quantitative survey results, and general commentaries into very specifics. What's actually working that we want to talk about? So you can't talk about all the negatives and the concerns without first starting what's working, what do we want to continue, and how do we continue to push that even harder? What are the opportunities? Not what the concerns are. What are the opportunities, and how do you address those opportunities? So, you know, our goal over the next couple of months is to have individual sessions with that, where people are providing feedback, where they feel comfortable in terms of where it is, and then we can consolidate very specific recommendations and bring that back to you with, here are some things that, you know, are very tangible that potentially could be, you know, and I think certainly we need to talk with some of those organizers of those groups, but, you know, if there's somebody on the school board who would want to come as a silent, you know, observer or participate as an individual, I'm not sure what the rules are on that. But, you know, I think there's an absolute goal and a desire, from my perspective, certainly is is identify and drive change. And, you know, the first thing is acknowledging a challenge exists. And I think when you have less than 20% of people saying agree or strongly agree on anything in the survey, there's a challenge that exists, whether it's a perception challenge or whether it's actually a technical challenge that is there. It's something that requires action, because if that doesn't change, that's a culture where you had, no matter how small that sample size, it was 100 plus people who were responding disagree or not agree, not strongly agree.
I think the only thing I'd want to add to that, and then I would like to open it to the rest of the board, is that it's what you're describing takes a lot of energy and a lot of effort. And I would hate to see the existing initiatives that have been put in place within the school system already by our superintendent to garner this feedback and to get this input would be ignored by that process. I would really like to see, and I think I would consider it to be the most productive way to engage in this, would be to get those interested people into the groups that are currently in place, because those do have a goal and those do have a mission, and those fit right into what our mission is. And it just seems to me there's a potential here for a lot of wasted energy in the wrong direction, when it could be channeled into what we see as a board as a positive direction, because that's what we
And my one recommendation would be speak to the people on those committees and why people who have been in those committees are no longer part of them, and there may be some insights that come from that. That would be my only recommendation.
Any other comments from board members? Thank you.
Yeah, I've got, yeah, I'm certainly open to any suggestions from teachers and staff, and you know, if they have a problem, you know, just come with a solution for it. Solve what happens in the classroom for me, for kids and teachers.
I would just like to say that we're all in this together, and we're in it together to achieve for our children. That's what it's all about, bottom line. And yes, there's got to be trust, there's got to be communication, and that is a two-way street. Communication doesn't only come from us here, it's got to come from you. And if you're not getting what you feel you need to hear or what you need to get, our numbers are listed on the website. You can individually come to a school board member and have conversation. We need to hear what you're saying. We're not closing you out. We listen, believe it or not. We take it to heart. We digest it, and we try to move forward as best we can. In a lot of ways, our hands are tied. We can only do so much, especially when it comes to funding. It's a given. We all know the budget's going to always be a battle for some time to come. It's snowballed. We are where we are. We've got to get in this. We've got to work our way through it and move forward. I would just like to say that this can work. I think there is some good points in what you've done, and I appreciate your hard work and what you've done, Mr. Sullivan. Certainly, there are things that we have to work on. I don't like the fact that we are at the low end of the totem pole when it comes per spending per student. I don't like that. I don't like that we can't give our teachers, our staffing, the salaries that they deserve. But we can, and we probably could never do that, because I don't think we could ever pay them monetarily for what they contribute to our kids, to our community as a whole. But I just want to personally say that my phone number is on the website. I am willing to listen individually. The word retaliation just really rattles me. I'd like to know what kind of retaliation has taken place. I don't know of any. So if that's the case, I'd like to know. What is it? When was it? What happened? Because that should not be. One of the first meetings I ever had as a school board member, I went to an FEA meeting and specifically stated, there's got to be communication. There's no reason why you should not be heard. So just know that we need to come together, we need to work together. I would like to know if there is something that you do not choose to share otherwise, that you can talk to someone on a personal level, call me. I'm open.
Ms. Armstrong?
I've been on this board 15 years, and the same thing's been said ever since I've been on here, that the board don't listen, the board don't try, the teachers are afraid to come before the board. We have worked hard to change that. We have let the teachers have, I assumed they were coming before the board when they wanted to come. I didn't know they were being chastised. I didn't know anything about that. And if that's what's happening, no, it should not be. I never thought they would be afraid to come before the board. When you say that we lack a sense of a vision and strategy, that's insulting, because I think we work hard to reach goals and try to do those things that really works, that makes the community work. Teachers have always asked for things. A lot of changes that was asked for, they got. Didn't like it because it was too much, or it wasn't right, or it wasn't done the right way, or whatever. There's always been that. But as far as communication, I don't foresee us having a problem with communication. If you have a problem, present it. And if you feel that you're being mistreated, you should tell that too. You know, I think if you're strong enough to come before the board and speak your voice, you should be strong enough to stand up behind. Like me, if I go to my supervision and voice my opinion or something I don't like, then I would be strong enough to deal with whatever comes with it. And I do not feel like that we as a board don't support the teachers. We support the schools. We've done a lot. We've made a lot of changes. And yes, there's been times that we had to make decisions that we were not happy with ourselves. We could have been out there talking to us, letting us know that we're not happy. But it just seems like it's never an end. I too would like to see some solutions. I would like to have some come before us with things that you say, okay, we'd like to see this. But come before us to bring things that will make changes other than maybe. I know there's problems as far as finances, a lot. But when you say that there are other things that could take place that would not have to deal with money, we need to hear that. What is it? Constantly remind us about it. Because it has been going on so very, very long. It's been on 15 years. I think when you first got on the board, it was issues with it. And when I got on the board, it was issues with it. We tried to make changes, and we just keep on trying. And we make changes year after year. But the only thing about it is, our area is not the only areas having problems. Some schools are having way more serious problems than Fluvanna. And I wonder, do we look at that? Do we analyze those situations? Or are we comparing to those schools? And I think that Fluvanna have a pretty decent board. But some of the boards I've had contact with is not as nice as we are. But not at all. But I just think that I would like to work at and communicate. And as far as communication, I think that's very important. One thing I think that has happened, I think we've built a darn good communication with our board of supervisors, our county administration. I mean, no, they may not give us all the money we want, they never have. But we work together. We try to make changes, work at changes. And we try to do the things we can to make it work for the community and for the children and our schools. They didn't want the high school. You know, the community didn't want the high school. Some teachers didn't want the high school. I mean, what do you do? What's your solution? If we did not have built, if we had not built that high school that we have now, what would we really be as residents of Fluvanna? What would we be doing with all those dilapidated elementary schools that we had to close to give teachers better workspaces, to give our kids better opportunities for education? Where would we be? So what do you really do? If I agree with Ms. Carr, join some of the committees we already on. We have committees that exist. Get involved. And we'd like to see a room packed. I would, because it's my last year on the school board. But I'd just like to see a room packed with teachers that's telling us positives that takes place in this system. Pack the house then. I mean, you know, let's get it together. Let's make a difference. And this is my version. Okay?
It's a good version. Okay. So, a couple things that I just wanted to bring to light. If you kind of look at the individual building results, and you look at those areas where they're agreeing, strongly agreeing, what I would suggest, the buildings that have issues with instructional autonomy, look at the high school. How are they able to do it? Look at, the high school has the highest approval rating on instructional autonomy, but look at Carysbrook. What's going on in Carysbrook that can be filtered down to Central? We keep talking, this board has focused over and over again about stop operating in silos. Become a pre-K through 12 division. That should be our mission. I mean, Carysbrook stood up here tonight and talked about how their students are ready to go to Mr. Stagg. When I first came on this board, you didn't hear that. So I put back on the FOF and the FEA to look at the data that you've presented yourself, work with those individuals who are ready to go to work and make a difference. Come to the table solution-focused and not problem-oriented. There are so many good things going on that if we don't take care of those things, we're going to start falling apart again. There are committees that each one of us sit on. Some of us 2, 3, or 4.
It doesn't stop here.
And when we meet, I mean, Ms. Armstrong's right, sometimes we're the only ones in here. I mean, so and look tonight, people are here because you came to present. And in April, they're going to be gone again. People have got to stay engaged with their constituent on the board. Call us, email us. I mean, that's the only way. If people do not walk up to us, call us, we don't know. And we cannot fix things that we don't know. I mean, the board sits here. We're that governing body. We hire a superintendent. And that's the only person we hire. We implement policies, procedures, push them to the superintendent. She pushes them out to her administration. They get filtered down to the school buildings. Maybe that's where the issue is. Communication can always get better. I don't think any one of us sitting up here would say that we communicate 100% of the time, because we don't. Life gets busy, things happen, and we often will react on, we need to do something, we need to call a meeting. Those times, there's no one here but us. Those public meetings are posted. People need to show up and be solution focused. That's all I'm saying. Thank you. Okay. Reports. Mr. President. FY 15 and 16 from your, like everything on this portion of the agenda, I do believe. Budget. Health insurance.
Good evening. It just gives me something to do, otherwise I'm just sitting in a little corner dungeon and wait for the phone to ring. I feel like the main times of paramount. Okay. Starting off, Negus, we're really moving along. I had the opportunity to spend 7.5 hours today on a 6-hour test of what we've sent them so far. We went through our charts of accounts, went through procedures, and what happened is it was a remote meeting. So we did it over the internet. We did it with our special analyst who was implementing it, and we went through purchase orders, requisitions, bank reconciliations, cashing checks, voiding checks, processing checks, everything to see that what we've done so far actually processes through the system. And it did take a long time, but it went well. What I really, again, as I mentioned before, is Mrs. Lena Henderson, who's our project manager for Eunice, and she is keeping us on track, and she's really engaged, and that's really good. So that was a big thing. We've been doing it. Many of us have homework. The Tower Technologies folks give us homework where we have to do things. I'm reviewing two items that will be in on Friday. We'll be sending up to deal with purchase orders and the format of checks. It seems like a little thing, but you've got to make sure that the right things show on there out of your massive data fields. So that's going on. We have training after spring break on site, and it starts, we get lots of on-site training. So that's moving along with the happy with that. I was going to meet with our scheduled auditor on the 4th. Last week wasn't a good week for all of us, and so I'm going to just meet with them over the phone. We have some discussions about how the audit's going to go this year, things that they'll be looking at. Also, the big news for 2015 is the General Assembly agreed on a budget on the 26th of February instead of waiting until midnight on the 28th. That doesn't seem like much, but that's the first time that's happened since, well before Fluvanna had a finance director. The General Assembly came up with things, and as we know, the General Assembly was a little more aggressive, but I'll talk about 15. As a result of their little tweaks, we get about $9,000 more than what the governor proposed in December. Now, because our ADM is projected to drop, we're projected to get less money next year than we have this year. However, the drop is only going to be $9,000 less than previously thought because they've done a couple of things. And one of the other things, they're going to, since they're going to lower the VRS rate next year, that's going to help us next year. But $9,000 spread across $19 million is a few thousand here and there, but it's still something. So they didn't want to do much with the boost bill because they wanted to make sure the revenue stream was intact to fix 16 and out. I mentioned the Munis test, I mentioned feeling like maintaining a pyramid. With that change in the governors, between the governors and what we were looking at, right now we're at about $131,000 below where we would be in the, we would have been if we had the exact same appropriation that was incorporated by the Board of Supervisors based on the General Assembly's budget. What's important to be aware of with this drop in fiscal year 15 is even if we are within 1 or 2 ADMs of being right on the budget number, so even if we hit exactly the projected ADM that they put in there, we lose money. It's not a matter of us having fewer kids than we expect. It's we are going to have the number of students with their average daily membership that they're projecting, but it's still a drop from last year, about 35. Going into next year, in 16, it's supposed to drop to about 44 ADMs. So, but what's happening, the difference is what happened with last year is we were falling about 30 students faster than the projection. This year we are right on, pretty much right on the projection. You can't turn the corner until you at least finally make the playing field. So we're back on the playing field and we're on the road. So that's what I have to say about 15 on its own. Execution-wise, now with the break because we adopted the budget earlier and the real actions aren't going to happen. The governor will be announcing what he's going to do, whether he's going to veto or line item or do an alternative, whatever, within the next week or so. But there isn't a lot going on, and there isn't a major expectation he's going to do anything radical. I'm focusing on getting better mechanism and tools to project where we'll be at the end of the year. We've worked hard at it, but we're trying to get ways that aren't as time intensive to get to the end of the year. We're still in a good place. Our expenditures continue to be below the line. We know we'll finish the end of the year in the black as far as not overexpending our authorization. Food services continues to do well. As I mentioned on the summary report, our student numbers are floating about where the projection is, and that's always good because we don't have surprises. That's all I have. If I expect questions on 15.
Any questions on 15?
One other thing, we do have a success. Our copier contract is doing well. We have downtime is minimal. So our staff is having strong access. And we just had an email today about how you will be able to scan to Google Drive from the copiers. So it's becoming a more powerful tool to get information out and share it without having to just use reams of paper. You can use mountains of electrons. That was something I want to bring up to Business River Council today. It's just a success.
Mr. Bressler, before you leave, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. I understand from Mr. Weaver that he got a figure on closing 2 schools, what was saved. Can you get that figure to me? I asked for it numerous times.
The figure
That's been that's a public document. Yeah, we presented that to the board several times.
I've asked for it numerous times, I never got a figure.
I thought you sent it again.
Because he asked me to send it. I'm glad to send it again.
I never did.
It was, and it's actually a little risky to call it a savings because it's not a savings. That's what Mr. Weaver and I were talking about. Doesn't mean that there was a cost effect of, what, $700,000 because you're looking at all the staff. But I can send it.
It was primarily staff.
Oh, staff. And utilities was separate, a separate slot that you had.
Finance director would say what do you really say because mostly you move staff around and students move too. real savings are, when we talk about the cost to operate those schools, would have been $3 million. That included staff, utilities, insurance, and all that other stuff. But those teachers didn't all go away because the students didn't go away. So it became a major shift. And some of those people that moved from Cunningham and Columbia, some of them left, some of them went other places, and other people moved and left in other places. So it's a real hard number to do. We had a goal to reach a reduction in expenditures by the Board of Supervisors, and we satisfied that goal. That's not necessarily a savings, it's an expenditure goal.
Yeah, I understand that to be a shuffle in personnel, which is a cost also, but, you projected, the schools projected a savings of closing those schools, and I was just curious.
Ms. Keller, she mentioned there's a document that can.
It was in the September 2014 board packet, because I just found the email.
I'm going to send it to you right now, the beauty of technology. I've got, it's right here, and it has I've got it.
Okay. All right.
Other questions or comments on
16.
Cover sheet talks about, as I mentioned, the General Assembly, they overwhelmingly passed. It was a 95-5 in the House. So that's an extremely bipartisan vote. And the Senate, it was similarly supportive of the conference budget, which invests as well as spends. The investing part for us is that they actually increase the contribution that reduces what the employer has to pay. So it started out at next year at being 14.5% because the employer share of VRS, which every $7, every time we spend $7 on an employment for $1 of VRS, it's been lowered from 14.5% to the governor of 14.15 to the House and Senate originally at 14.06, now 14.07, now it's 14.06. 0.43% may not seem like much, but 0.43%, $20 million is a measurable sum. So that's all contributed to health. So what I've done is I've taken the numbers, taken the model that the Department of Ed's provided in the template, which is available on the Department of Ed website, and I went back in and took our page 19 summary request of funds using the revised numbers. So we still have a significant drop in state funding, but it's now just under $182,000, mainly driven by a number of students. The compensation changes because not only did we have a savings in VRS, which we had before, but the governor didn't propose any compensation. The House and the Senate came together and in their conference wound up giving us more money than either one of them had, so we're going to get almost $160,000. So while on paper it would cost us $361,000 to put everyone on a scale and give an average across the division, 1.5%, because we've saved almost $82,000 in the VRS reduction, and then getting almost just under $160,000 from the General Assembly, it's only going to cost us local money, so we're going to use $120,000 to get that, to achieve that effect in 16. So that's a pretty significant investment from the state. It helps us do something that we're supposed to. So this is one of those reasonably funded mandates. There are other issues though, obviously. Standards of quality only covers the 260 standards of quality positions, not the 230 other positions we have. Standards of quality positions, again, are paid. A teacher, an elementary teacher is only valued at $45,000 in the standards of quality. Secondary and special ed teacher is $47,000 to $48,000, and it goes on from there. So we have to pick up those differentials as well. But that's a significant amount of money to help us with our situation. Next item was health insurance. We met, and I talk about health insurance a little later. At the end of February, we received our rates. They said it was 5%. It's effectively just a little under it. We had budgeted about $312,000. It's in PowerPoint. It's down. It's about 308 with our actual membership because of where the people fall, and we hold everybody harmless from the raise. And in the case of the high deductible plan, the rates are actually a little lower than they would have been even if the whole harmless rate drops somewhat. There's a minor tweak in the additional staff because we asked for 2 additional people in the VRS rate changes drops so our request went from over $1.2 million to just under $1.1 million is what we would need in funding. The Board of Supervisors, so this is a little over 4 cents on the tax rate. The Board of Supervisors did make adjustments for a variety of things at the meeting. They had some very good discussions. Started the presentation and some discussions and they put up the first tax. So this is a revised. So we'd be asking for a total of $16.35 million. And there is other technology infrastructure there.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment about the budget that was proposed and was presented to the Board of Supervisors. For those of you who were there was very good conversation among the Board of Supervisor members about the raise and the health insurance. At the board meeting, they talked about giving us $550,000, which, like you said earlier, we never get everything we asked for. And we knew that going in, that was not looking in our favor. But I mean, for the board to sit there and have the conversation of, well, those two things really go together, because if you're giving everyone a raise, but then health insurance is going up, if you take that money away, then they're taking even less home because they're paying more for the health insurance. Ms. Armstrong can attest that those conversations several years ago would have never happened. And so when you talk about what's in our budget and how it's being presented, looking at these items that are on here, and even with technology, we're doing things to try to maintain where we are right now. This is not even anything above and beyond what the other needs are. But even if we're given 550, they sat there and they were having the conversation about, you need to at least give them enough to offset the budget and the compensation and the health insurance to go together. So they hear us, and I think it's important for us as even board members to remember that it's important for us to have conversation with our Board of Supervisor member, but it's also important for everyone else in the community and staff, from the superintendent down to the bus drivers, the custodians, and the cafeteria staff, to have conversations. You see them, you have a conversation with them, you email them. We can't do it all ourselves. Just for them to have a conversation about that. I had a long conversation with Mr. Sheridan last week about this. He doesn't like where we are either, but there's not a lot that you can do at this point, but try to hold things together and inch things a little at a time, because otherwise you start talking about a tax rate of $1.05. We have a board that's saying right now, 93 cents. That's above where I actually even thought they were even thinking of advertising. Now, that doesn't mean that that's going to be the set rate, and that's why we have to keep hitting it hard to help them understand. Look at where we are. And you're right. The initiatives just keep coming, and there's not a lot of money attached to them. So they have to understand that, this is 4 cents. Our total budget recommendation was 4 cents. But, I think we have to be realistic with kind of where we are as a county. And at the same time, I think we have to continue to make the effort of showing our Board of Supervisors who has they're the governing tax authority. We don't have taxing authority. So, I mean, I think that it's important for, everyone to understand again that we can't do it by ourselves.
This is the dates we've moved along. The governor has the budget, they're reviewing it. Again, the things the governor can do is he can sign the budget bill, veto the entire bill, certain line items, or recommend amendments. The General Assembly will reconvene in April. The Board of Supervisors' public hearing is on the 8th, and then they will set the tax rate and adopt the budget on the 15th.
Just a quick question on that. If he does recommend amendments, how far back does it need to go? Just a conference, or does it actually have to go back?
They'll meet, I believe we'll have a conference committee meet very quickly. It's not really clear because there isn't a lot of news in this color appears from Bassline. Most of the interesting one, most of this budget came out, we knew about it when it was finally, you hear some things on the outside, but unlike in the past from Richmond, there were people walking by a microphone and saying we're doing this. Because we found out about it as they were pretty much doing it. But they will call it, they'll call it and they'll get a decision. Unless something radical happens, this will all be resolved around the middle of
The middle of what?
April. They get back in. Unless the governor makes some recommendations that are significantly different than but I don't know for sure that the conference committee will get together, but they want to act quickly because they also are not happy with what's happening in the past. The fact that the revenue has picked up makes everyone feel a little better, so they want to move forward instead of having looked at our revenues dropping in the state. You know what's going, it's actually turned a corner to our ADM local. They feel like they can as a whole body, move forward. The biggest push for a compensation increase came out of the House this year, ahead of the House Appropriations Committee. Not a group that normally recommends spending money to raise salaries on it. They realized there's something to do, but they also came up with the idea of the offset. Again, revenue collection talks about how the different rates were, and how where the different pay increases came in, where they talked about it. So the conference committee has come up with a 1.5% average for SOQ positions. We just applied that to the average. The SOQ positions are only 1%, it works across for people who aren't get something on a step wherever they fall. And I think that might be the last slide.
I just realized that April 8th is our school board meeting, as well as public hearing.
Which we've actually changed that in the past too.
We've moved up the school board meeting.
Yeah,
That
just
Earlier in the day.
either earlier in the day, we've held it earlier so we can get to the public hearing. I definitely would recommend that.
What time is it? 7 o'clock?
7 o'clock.
We're talking about
We need to decide that too.
I think we started at 4.
At close.
We
Closed session at 3.
We had a closed session at 3. That'll give us enough time to get through an agenda and get to public hearing. Mr. Rittenhouse, Ms. Armstrong. You can do that. Said he can make it.
Busy day, that day.
Okay. Okay, so April the 8th, closed session at 3. We go meeting at 4. As a change. Okay, thank you. Any other questions on 16?
You said it was April 15th that the governor would weigh in.
It's possible, in fact, that's happened in the past few years. In fact,
I mean,
it
there was,
wasn't 2012, but
there was one year we didn't have a budget.
well, in
It was
2000,
in May. There was one May we didn't have a budget.
But I didn't think it was the governor that was delaying it. I thought it was still
there was.
Because there were changes in the line items, I believe.
But in 2012, the Board of Supervisors deferred the decision because they were expecting the General Assembly to come to a consensus on the date of that, and they delayed it to May 1st, and that's when they made the adjustment. The General Assembly never acted on that date.
Any other questions on 16? Comments? Health insurance?
As I mentioned earlier, we went up meeting with the local choice program rep on February 13th. If you remember, that was later in the month. When we ran through the model with our participation distribution, came out about $5,000 less than we had in the budget, so that's always a good thing. Also keeps people held harmless, so the rates are. There have been some changes to the program in 2016 that some of them are driven by the Affordable Care Act and some of them are just driven by some decisions. One is, the biggest change they're going to do is in regard to dental benefits. There are going to be two categories of dental benefits, and everyone has, it has to be an individual decision whether you want what's called comprehensive or preventive. Comprehensive is basically what is under the local choice program now. Preventative is more of it's lower cost coverage. It includes routine oral exams and preventive sealants for children and cleanings and things like that. But it's a lower level of coverage. It costs less per month, but that's an individual's choice of which one they want. It's not anything that governing body can assume. Dual choices. So when we go through open enrollment, we'll make sure there's all that information out there. Mr. Stafford will be making sure there's a lot of information out on the differences between the two coverages. So that's the biggest change. They're offer two levels. Because again, if you're a young person in your 20s, the amount of dental care that you need is a lot different than if you're a family with growing children. So that's something they decided to offer. They've also done something that's really neat. It's called Live Health Online. You may have heard of it. What this does is, and it's a 24/7 access to a doctor licensed to practice in the Commonwealth of Virginia. You can go online, and you may have seen it on television, and they question you. And because they're licensed in the state of Virginia, they can write a prescription. They can look at you and you have the apparent symptoms. I mean, obviously, they'll ask you, they can ask you to take your temperature and things like that. But they can do prescriptive medicine. They can then look at you and know as a doctor say, you need to go to an emergency room, you need to go to an urgent care clinic, or tell me your pharmacy and I will get this prescription done. If you have a recurring situation and they get your health information, that's 24/7. It's going to be on any of those plans. That means when you're traveling and you're out in the middle of somewhere that you aren't comfortable with, you can sign on to this, and with your local choice number, you can get into this, and this information will be out. That way you can get access to a doctor who's able to do medication there. And I can remember back to when my son was 4, when we were in Pennsylvania, he had an ear infection, trying to figure out, on a Friday afternoon at 4:30, finding a doctor is not a good thing, but this is a way to deal with that. So that's something that other plans are doing. It's something that Anthem does on the Anthem side, but it's more accessible. I think that's one of the super neat things. They did mention that ID cards will be just mass reissued in September of this year. That's it. We'll be having that information shared with the staff. We have to make a renewal decision and notify them by April 1st. So that's why we've added this as an agenda item. The renewal rate is the second year in a row. It's 5% or less. That's the lowest. Those are the lowest renewal rates. I've been here 5 years. 3 of those years, it's been more than double. It's been double digits for well past 10%. And you know, we went through this. This is manageable. One of the comments I will give from the Board of Supervisors is they did observe about question about how long you can hold people harmless. Mr. one of the members, and that is the question. But the point is, we are going to hold people harmless this year. That's as far out as we can look, because we know what the renewal rates are, so we know we can do it this year. We'll have to look as we go forward to see how next year looks, what we're going to ask for. And a reminder, this contract year is offset from our fiscal year. It starts on October 1st. So people continue to pay the existing premium until October 1st, and then for 9 months of next year and 3 months of the following fiscal year, they pay the next year. So again, the renewal and our rate program that we have is going to hold people harmless, or hold them at least at the fiscal year 15 level that we've budgeted. In the case of the high deductible plan, it's going to drop a little in some of the cases. And so that's why it's going to be a July. Any questions about health insurance?
Any questions about health insurance? Okay. And we are in an agreement with PrEP.
A few years ago, we were able to get a memorandum of agreement with the folks at PrEP. It's a written agreement. Part of the agreement says you actually have to reissue the agreement if both boards do recorded action. The PrEP board voted on it was an agenda item. They voted in favor of it to continue for the next fiscal year. If they want to continue the agreement where we provide fiscal services, I gave them an estimate of what the cost would be for us to provide that. It was just under $71,000 last year, and it's just slightly over by $40, $71,000 this year. The PrEP board agreed to $71,000 again. We can deal with $40 or so. So that's an agenda item 2. It's going much smoother. We are going to integrate PrEP into Munis, so they're going to have access to Munis, which will serve over time to actually reduce our reimbursement from them, because the amount of work that Mrs. Miller has to do manually entering things is going to drop down. They're going to be doing the work. So we'll get less, but we'll be able to spend more time doing our stuff and less time doing their stuff.
You said it is going to be incorporated into Munis.
Yes, ma'am, they are. They're going to be part of the training. We arranged, and we're going to have a remote access over the wall. Yeah, we have an access system for them. And they're part of the training. They've given us information. They will have, they have their own checks, their own purchase orders.
So do you foresee us being able to back off of some of the services that we provide them in 16?
We'll be able to reduce the amount of labor. In the second half of 16, the second half of 16, we will be able to, we will drop our accounts payable effort. Because they'll be picking it up and doing things online instead of doing purchase orders. We'll be doing it through the system, with the requisitions will be much faster. Mrs. Miller will have to do data entry. She'll be doing review and approval as opposed to data entry, which is a lot less time consuming.
So this projected expense
But
is taking that into consideration?
Yes, but they also pay us in August for the whole year.
Okay.
So we've taken that into consideration. 17 will be a much more interesting estimate.
Okay.
Any other questions about our friends at Prep?
Policies.
We received the February update from VSBA. There were 27 policies and regulations for men to enact, and we have, we were going to put in, then we have a local version of the VSBA policy. If we do it involves visitors, it's slightly reported slightly differently. So there's a total of 28 policies and regulations that are provided. The summary sheet, as I've done in the past, there summarizes what the changes are. Some of them are nothing more than grammar, punctuation, or style. Some of them are substantial. Conflict of interest has been changed. That's obviously a big thing that involves ethics. And it's no longer, while it's under school board governance and school board operations, they haven't made a separate one, but it involves employees. So this conflict of interest policy applies to everyone now, and it clarifies the policy a little different. We did a lot of changes having to do with how the law deals with synthetic cannabinoids. That's a ton of
Mr. Breslau, could you just explain, and I apologize for being too lazy to look up the code section, but the position of tiebreaker in the school board, there's some new language there. What exactly does that mean?
They changed the wording, so they made sort of one sentence. You don't have to have a tiebreaker, but you can have a tiebreaker. And that's somebody who lives in your community.
If any.
If any. And so they added, it used to be, I think, 2 sentences.
Okay.
They decided to just make it 1 sentence. And that's a local decision, and it's something that all of them would do if they wanted a tiebreaker. Odd number of words do not very often have tiebreakers. It's hard to get it. It's possible by somebody abstaining, but it's not usual. And even then, did any of that help?
Yes. Thank you. Well, one other quick question, and this is
Sure.
strictly just stylistic. You're changing to present tense throughout here. Is there any reason for that?
That's the style change.
Because that's just what VSBA
VSBA,
is doing.
there used to be something, was it the American Library Association, the ALA manual, style manual, and now they're going to the American, the APA, the American Psychological. They changed their standard of style, and they've been doing that for 2 years, and they're just working their way through it. I guess that's what you can do with the VSBA.
Change your style.
Change your style. I mean, they're not substantive, but because there are changes, they have to be reviewed and approved by the governing body. Some of them, though, are obvious. One of them I'll mention real quickly, because I know people might take a long. Naming school facilities, they realized that they didn't clarify that school facilities need to actually mention that it's schools and school facilities. They sort of left that out, so they was not going to add it after. Back in October, you went and did it. Now we're doing it to fix it. And then, come May, Ms. Kreitzer and I get to go to a policy workshop. And I was warned by the policy person that because everybody was feeling good with the money, they felt really good about doing policy and changing legislation. So there will be a lot of opportunities to go through. Last year, we had 60 to 70 that we brought in the beginning of June. We're talking about between 75 and 110 policies that we go through. Legislative changes. The other questions about policy?
Not about a policy, but just wanted to get an update from probably building level administrators on how the buzzer systems are working, just because there is a policy about school visitors. Can you,
Do you want each
just,
of them?
yeah, just give me an update, Mr. Leach, or somebody?
They're working really well from what I hear from all the staff and parental feedback. And we're looking at actually adding a couple down in transportation, we're exploring, adding some more to some other entrances. But unless the other principals have other things, I've been getting nothing but positive feedback.
They're working really well, and parents are very appreciative of the additional security.
I'm just curious, is there more than one in the high school?
More than one.
You can't get into the
You
school
can-
without, you can only get into the
Just the
So
front
there's no
door.
back entrance that so it has some
Not the main entry. You have to have a swipe card to be able to get in the back door. Is that
The
correct?
only door that's open during the day is the front.
Is it front?
It's super clean because you have to look all
Questions about policies? Please remember we will be voting on these in April. So if you have any questions, concerns, please make sure to bring those back so they are ready to be voted upon. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Grassroots advocacy, Ms. Carr, any update you want to provide?
Well, actually, as we all know, we do have a budget now. They're working. It's not final yet. What I find interesting, what I've been thinking about is that the initiative for grassroots advocacy, I think has been primarily directed at bringing to the public, making them aware of what's going on in the legislature. But this recent survey that we had and some of the issues that we just discussed regarding communication makes me think that we probably have a closer to grassroots advocacy that we should be involved in. And I'm just, my first thought was, as you said, it's a global issue that we have to deal with here, not just for the superintendent, not just for the board, but down to the least citizen, whoever that would be, to make the board of supervisors aware, make the public aware what these issues are. And my thoughts were at this point just to have something in some public forum that says these are the conversations. These are the statements, and basically even just 3 or 4 good one-line mission statements or fact statements. That these are the important points that we can. I'd like to see that in some public forum that we all agree on. So I would, I guess, propose something like that and ask for comments, ideas, recommendations.
I think that's a good idea to be able to do something like that. I mean, you're right. I mean, we have to make sure that we're involving everyone so that everyone understands and is informed of what's going on. I mean, even with the SBA and they push out, at the delegate assembly, hundreds, hundreds of their positions that they would take if they were to go to become a bill. And I think that, just for us to be able to have that information, to be able to push forward. I mean, we talked about maybe doing something in the Fluvanna review. And it may be something that we can do, like if the board has like the highlights or something, board updates, board thoughts, or something to kind of put a statement out there. I mean, and you're right. I mean, it can't be anything really long and lengthy. I mean, it needs to be pretty succinct.
Well, this can get so overwhelming so fast. And I think that the average citizen is not quite prepared to go into a financial aid.
Right.
But I think that knowing what the singular issues are, the biggest issues, and giving them some idea as to, I guess, what we as a board would want to see the public be aware of would be unvaluable, at least to those who would read what we could produce. There's always that question. So I guess just as a first step, something to put into the Fluvanna review would probably be a good idea. But there's other media. And I just don't know to what extent we would want to use anything online that's already connected with the schools versus some different. I hesitate to make use of that. I mean, just assume that we can't until we've all decided that's the appropriate thing to do.
Well, the board sorry. Yeah, and you're right. I mean, I think you have to be careful about the message that you're sending when it's attached to the school, that it has to be something that the board, I mean, we have voted on and agreed that this is what we're going to put out there.
Well, when the board, I was thinking about this past, I can't remember if it was November or December, but when there was a lot of discussion about legislation and bills and what, the path that was taken, when the board adopted and resolution on funding, this board, and then when the board spoke about the position statements, which linked to what VSBA had, those things are they're there for the public, but I'm thinking more, maybe what you guys are thinking as well, more of an emphasis that, we publicize our board agenda and we push out that information, et cetera, et cetera. But and the action items, here's an action item report. But we could be more cognizant of making sure that here's the board agenda, please notice, and then there would be highlights that the board will determine their positions on legislative issues coming from the state. That information is there, even if we're adopting what VSBA has as position statements, because you can only act as a board anyway.
Right.
But that we make an effort, because that comes from our office, that we make an effort, once you have determined what the agenda is, that we make the effort to highlight that those things are going to be discussed or that's going to come out, because then
so that you can actually follow those.
Yes, and give the links. There's great links.
Because
legislative
the delegate assembly, when they come out, they usually come out like that first week in December, and then that's when Emily kind of hits it hard. I mean, we could easily
just use that.
Look at that list and push forth a couple of issues that would really impact us. I mean, the biggest one that, we've had quite a bit of discussion about is the TIBO bill.
Right, and I'm sure there's a position that, as a board, we should be putting together.
And
I'm aware of how we're going to interpret that ultimately.
And I also think that it's important for the community and parents to understand that that bill is being pushed forward. I mean, for them to understand that this could impact our school division. And I think that if we publicize those ideas, things that could really have a true local impact, then I think, we'll start getting, a little bit better reception from, and people may communicate with us a little bit more about, because there are quite a few people, even now, even parents that I talk to, they don't know what the TIBO bill is about, or even that it was passed. People have kind of thought it'll never happen, and it did happen.
The other element to this question is one that, again, this survey has sensitized me to, and that is that they need to hear this coming from the board. Because, at this point, I think it would be good for them to see something coming directly from us, and not just through the superintendent's office. Because there is this perception of this.
Could we perhaps change the way the action items are published. Because the action items at the agenda now, I mean, we just looked at those 28 policies. You know, I mean, being kind of pushing that information out there again to say, these 28 policies were presented at the March meeting, they're going to be voted on in April. Let us hear your feedback.
I like that idea.
Making the action item report be a little bit more than, you know, maybe it's just a report from the board or,
Well, when
you know, in the report.
needs to be the school board.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry.
I mean, we could, I mean, I think
that was actually helpful, but.
Yes.
It's
Well, I mean, well, let's put it this way. If somebody would, if I could have evidence that somebody actually reads what I've produced, I'm sure there's a frustration in every writer out there. But the orientation previously was to really just kind of cover the whole board meeting as a whole. But I think that we were to focus on what is the message really that we want to convey.
I mean, for
how
health
to.
insurance. I mean,
Yes,
how it's
that's
changed.
the
I
really
mean,
important
5%, approximate 5% increase, but, you know, your options are going to change.
I am certainly happy to be constituted. And it could be.
Ms. Carlson,
Yeah.
maybe we could look at just the reports and the agenda and the action items.
I would
kind of,
that would make life parties.
do a little something, because you already put the action report out. You could just add another little blurb from, I mean, even the information that was presented at the board meeting. And then Ms. Carr, you could kind of take the report piece of it, like the health insurance and, you know, the policies, and have a link there for folks, so that then they don't have to go looking for it. We actually link them to the policy section that's going to be updated. What does everybody else think?
Mr. Rick,
There's another way to do it out there.
If people actually read everything that was in the Virginia School Board Association policies, there's a lot of strange stuff in there. One in particular that I took note of, service animal allowed in school. You can have a miniature horse as a service animal.
You sure can.
If it's potty trained.
You sure can. It's true. And in cities, and in larger city divisions, they're in there. I mean, you know, but that's the thing. I mean, but I think if the link is there, then you can actually, you know, you can focus on what you want to focus on. And I think that, you know, if the whole issue is there's a lack of communication, I think we need to do our part to make it better. And sometimes communication can be overload, but you know, how many times do you read your work email?
I mean, that's choice, though.
I mean, you know, maybe we can, and maybe once you and Ms. Kreitzer come up with the first one, you can kind of share it among us and
Absolutely.
and look at it and say, is this what we're thinking? Is this too much? Not enough? Sort of thing. You're right. There are a lot of yesterday policies that you look up and go, really? Really? They really had to put that in there? Somebody tried it, you know? Somebody tried it somewhere.
So,
Okay,
that's
sorry.
what I had to say about grassroots. We'll give it
I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good idea. Thank you for taking that on. See what happens when you put something on the agenda, Stan.
Well,
Ms. Keller, updates, reports.
It looks like a lot that they're putting, but I wanted to tell you, it's not in the bulletin item, but I did get a message of thanks from Mr. Watkins and Mr. Schoenbach about their Ohio trip. That was the trip that they take every year. But we were going to put on a board agenda. It was one of the many snow days. So that's why we put it on the consent agenda, but it's basically after the fact. But he wanted to make sure that I let the board know that they were able to compete in what they call the Ultimate Teen Challenge, and which actually included a women's division as well as men's. He said there are 3 classes for each group, and they were able to take 5 of those 6 classes. And just wanted to thank the board because it's a great opportunity for students. So just to let you know that. The second thing I'll keep going is the 14-15 calendar update, just so that we go on record to say that we have missed 9 days. We have 10 banked days. We expect to not use that 10th day, but we'll see. That's our plan.
It's going to stay warm.
If I met with staff advisor on Monday, and we talked a bit, even about, do you take March 16th and make that a school day, and buy you some more time, or, I mean, the reality is that would be super short notice, and our teachers really need that time. They need to have that day. And the other piece is our bus drivers are in an all-day required state training, mandated training, so that would be a little difficult. So I think we stay the course and hope and expect that we're not going to use that last final day.
I look at the weather every day.
I do too.
For the whole week.
I do too. The 2015-2016 revised school calendar, you approved this last month, and I'm bringing it back to you because I'm probably not exaggerating when I say there were probably about 30 people who reviewed this calendar. And then Ms. Gillum walked into my office one day and said, we only have 179 days of school. We didn't count this right. And I really mean lots of people count these days. So what we did is when we moved the days in October to have a staff development day and then a holiday, it's October 9th and 12th. When we added that, what I call it's a little bit of a long weekend, and it does link to parent-teacher conferences. What we did is we didn't add a school day back in. So what we did to change the calendar was we put the March staff development day back in as a school day. So now we're back on track. So I would just need you to approve that change. Thank you for that. The next couple bulleted items really link. Ms. Pace and I have been able to meet with the TJ's group. There is a discussion, and I'm actually going to bring to the board in April a letter that I would ask your approval, where we would, as Fluvanna County Public Schools, authorize the offering of a diploma. It's called the National External Diploma. There's a lot of details involved in that, but ultimately it gives opportunity for older, I would call older students. I believe the age is 25.
That's what Charlottesville is.
That's what Charlottesville.
I think Augusta goes at 21.
21.
It's definitely like out of high school age, but
So we adopt what age? Or how does that work?
I would still recommend we do 25 because we have GED programs, but we also have, and I did talk to Gail von Kaiserling and Mary Ott about this, and not to oversimplify the process, but it's another opportunity for people who have left school, maybe dropped out, needed to, be able to come back. It's a program that offers them a diploma, and they would get, so for Fluvanna residents, if someone was in that particular situation, and I don't expect even 10 people, but I expect that we may see some movement toward this because the National External Diploma looks like an attractive option versus just what I would call the regular GED, which has become very difficult. So I would ask that we approve that we authorize the extending of that diploma once the person has met those requirements. But I'll bring more specific information to the board and bring the letter because we would just need to let TJs know that we're willing to do that. Charlottesville City has already signed, and actually I believe all the divisions were willing to do.
It sounds like it.
Right, to offer it for their particular group. The adult ed reorganization, we met when Ms. Pace and I were there with TJ's, we met with one of the representatives from Piedmont Virginia Community College, and we've talked probably for 2 years for PVCC to take on the adult ed programs. And it doesn't mean that they would physically come here and teach for us. We still have Gail Montgomery and Mary Ott working really purely on grants. But it does mean that if they take over that program, which it looks like they're going to do, we'll create a memorandum of understanding and bring all that, so we can look at it, that those participants would have access to the services at PVCC, which I think is wonderful. So career counseling and some assistance with on the job training and job placement, those kind of things. We have asked that I've put together some recommendations. I'm actually going to send those to Ms. Pace to look at too, because I've met with Gail and Mary and asked them if you could, if they could even look at the Families Learning Together program or the GED program, what would they like to have from PVCC? Would they like to have a monthly visit, once a week counselor? I said, tell me what you'd like, and then let's see what we can do to get the services here at sometimes. I also suggested that we be able to maybe provide transportation for career fairs that are at PVCC so that we get our people who are in those programs to PVCC. But I think the best piece of all this is that the community college would organize the efforts around adult education. I have never believed that pre-K through 12 should be organizing adult education. I think that that's a real
I think it also, not to interrupt you, I think it also brings the realization that a high school diploma is not the end, but there is being exposed to Piedmont and the college and what it offers. It's, I think, just that alone can be a real encouragement to go further.
Yes. Okay. The SOQ committee members, I believe you have that in your packet, and I had asked Ms. Gillum if she would give us about a 1 minute. I told her she didn't have to do long. 1 minute bit of information about why this, the timeline for this. And Mr. Rittenhouse and I actually had a discussion today about the timeline. And Mr. Rittenhouse, I apologize because I said that they would be bringing it, within the next 2 months for approval. It actually comes in the fall. But Ms. Gillum can talk about it.
We've been trying to meet since January, and it snows every couple of weeks. So we had our first meeting on last Tuesday, and had some good attendance. And then basically what we do is we take the standards of quality comprehensive plan document and look at the different sections and divide into teams. So we organize ourselves into teams, and then we start meeting on next Tuesday. We'll start to delve into the document further. Part of what we do is look at the plan that we have in place, what items need to be updated, that maybe there's data in the document that needs to be updated, that sort of thing. And then we also look at new legislation that's come about since 2013. So we'll look at the 14 legislation, and then once the 15 legislation is officially released, we'll look at that as well. And just kind of make sure we're marrying those two things together. We also look at your strategic goals and try to figure out, are there elements of that document that we need to embed other goals or processes to reach certain things. One of the things that we're focused on is continuous improvement. So it's not just about making the standards, but what's beyond that. And one of the things that we're using as part of that is looking at the Virginia Incentive Program, which recognizes schools for not just students passing SOL scores, but achieving advanced passing scores and other pieces of things like industry credentials and school health programs and things like that. So I'm excited about what the community is going to do. I think it's everybody that's ever served on it with me before has said how much they learned through this process. When we've recruited members through press releases. We also reached out to our schools and said, can you help to get us some parents and teachers that might be willing to be a part of this? We would certainly welcome anybody else that would like to join us at this point. But I think it's a good team.
Okay, two more things real quickly. Summer enrichment information will be coming out really soon. Mr. Estes met with PVCC again, I believe, yesterday. And they're finalizing, there's a 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks in June, actually June 1st all the way to June 12th. Looks like there'll be 12 academies, and students can sign up. We have scholarships, and so we're working really hard to get that out quickly. And I told PVCC I wouldn't publicly point my finger at them for taking a little longer, and I really am not. But exciting things coming. I know the drama class was a really big hit last year. That's one of the ones that's coming back, and looks like it's coming back those first 2 weeks. But the first 2 weeks of June, I had a couple parents reach out to me because they're making summer plans, and so we're working to get that information out real quickly. The other thing is there's a 3-day enrichment camp during spring break, and we've already sent that information out. We're going to push it out again several more times in the next couple of weeks. I know that the schools have it posted and put it on their websites, but we've also put it on, Facebook, etc. So good things. The last thing, and it actually links a bit because the focus on Fluvanna and the FEA survey was a delegation. I think I can link back to that a little bit with this. I know with public comment, we're not allowed to do that. June 18th is a day that last year I believe we called it. I don't have sorry I didn't bring the paper with me. A springboard, and it is a springboard. It's a day where we take time to look at where we are, look at our data and what does it show. Not just SLL data, but what does our attendance data look like for our children? How are our children by subgroups performing? What are we doing in the discipline realm? What type of things? Last year we looked at things like what are the patterns? What do we see? What's the nature of it? Not always the number of something that happens, but what's the nature? Is it a student-to-student issue, etc.? But part of that is also making sure that we do look at the survey results. On March 23rd, I have members of the staff advisory, and I've asked the principals if anybody else from their building would like to join, they can. They're going to come and work with us because we agreed, I believe, back in October that we were going to rewrite our survey. So we ran that same survey for 3 years. We do need to make it more meaningful, and I think that's important. And if anything, that when people come together, and whether it's out of frustration or whether it's frustration that's real or frustration that's just frustration and there's not a lot anybody can do about it. The important piece is that we own it, and we take it in and think about it. I spent, I would say, an hour at least with all the principals and all the directors, and sat down and said, of all the things that we do for our schools, we always have to think about what can we do better. And so many of the board members said similar things. What are the trends, what are the patterns, and then how do we make that better? But we only make it better if we do it together. We don't make it better if we do it separately. So June 18th, for example, and I did have the opportunity to speak with Mr. Sullivan and Ms. Carrie Murphy-Hammond at length, and we talked about if there are focus groups that are looking at solutions, we want those solutions to come to the table. And on that day, and hopefully, I know people travel during the summer, so not everybody's going to be there. But those ideas come, and that we really sit down and wrestle with them and talk about what can that look like. What are these things? I don't use a lot of quotes that sound so cliche, but one of the ones I love that Stephen Covey always says is seek first to understand and then to be understood. And that's so important because there are lots of things that I can tell you I can be frustrated about, and I know I pick up the phone and we'll call Ms. Washington about things that come down from the state or the federal government that it just makes, it's not a pretty thing to say, but it makes me crazy because it's so not student-centered, or it's so putting the thumb on our teachers so much that they are exhausted. I know it's extremely hard. It's harder than it ever was to be an educator. It's harder than when I taught. I know that. So my point is, June 18th, if you're in town, I want our staff members there. Board members I know can come in here, you can't, it's tricky because you're the governing body, and I don't know that everybody, I believe people here understand that, I don't know that everybody understands that. You can listen, but you can't engage because you can't operate as an individual person. But my staff can be there, and people can be there and bring those ideas to the table and make it, and really make it work. So June 18th, I'll say it one more time, but we're going to publicize that earlier this year. I did have one of my staff advisory members say, she said, I loved it. I loved being there last year, but I'm not sure everybody understood what it was all about. So that's a communication issue. We'll be better at that. So that's all I have for this evening. Thank you.
Ms. Keller, this may not be the right place, but I'll put it out there anyways. I wonder if perhaps next month on the agenda, could we have you provide us with just a clarification of the reimbursement for travel policy that we have in the schools for those both curricular, within the curriculum and extracurricular activities?
Yes.
I just don't understand what it is, and I'd like to communicate with you.
Be glad to do that. The other thing linked to this, I'd be glad to bring to the board. We brought it before in October when we worked with the staff on continuing the principals and the communication plans. I bring to the board what does exist, because it doesn't mean that it can't be changed, and it doesn't mean it's perfect. But and it's not about perfection. It's just about, I think the key is again thinking deeply about any patterns, whether it's our survey, this survey, what's happening. But how do we make that work? But bring together for the board again what teams we do have, what are required. We know those, but we can bring them. I think we brought them in October and November. Just what are the required committees? What committees do we have? And who are the required members? We have project teams. What are their focus areas? What has staff advisory focus been this year? What is the type of things that they talked about? Where does that happen? What happens in the schools? I think it would be good just to, so you see it and have a good eye of scrutiny as well.
I think that would be very good.
I'd be glad to do that. Thank you. Okay. That's all right.
The Tech Ed Summit at Charlotte High School. Did we
Oh, we did.
How many did we have 3 or 4?
4 or 5. We did, and I know.
So it was Saturday and Sunday, right?
Did Amy Hartwell go? Pam Loving, sorry, I didn't remember all these.
Tanya Bouch from the other school.
Okay. And I saw Amy today, she said they loved it. And Lynn Davis.
We got good press on news. So
Yeah. We
get
get
it from all over.
all over. It's a big, big conference. Yeah, actually, VSUP is going to take that on next year versus Charlottesville Schools trying to do it.
It's a huge one.
It's huge. It started out relatively small, but VSUP has agreed to take that on and organize that, which is good because VSUP, Virginia School University Partnership, is comprised of about 53 school divisions, I think, this year, and it's really increased. So.
Okay. CenturyLink Ontario easement.
That's Mr. Gifford.
Intellis Wireless has a cellular site at Abrams, and they're looking at upgrading their fiber infrastructure to provide more bandwidth to their cellular customers. So they reached out to CenturyLink to coordinate the implementation of that. And so CenturyLink has requested an easement to bring in the new fiber infrastructure. And the cellular, or the communication tower at Abrams is actually owned by Conterra Broadband. We lease it from them. So we ran the request by Conterra just to make sure that they were okay with the request. Because Verizon Wireless has already been approved ground access in a very close proximity to where the easement was. And Conterra was fine with the easement as long as CenturyLink did not construct any sort of site, if you will, above ground, any sort of frame like H-frame or things that are typically found in these sort of locations. They did ask that CenturyLink have a non-inclusive easement so that other carriers could come in to provide access if Verizon Wireless needed an easement themselves, or any other provider that may come in the future. I also ran this by our maintenance supervisor, Dave Fields, who was fine with easement, other than he was concerned about, we have a well across the street that has both a water pipe as well as an electrical line running to it. And he just requested that the contractor that CenturyLink uses make sure that they notify when they're going to be on site so that Dave Fields can show them exactly where it is so that they don't tear it up. So it's been green lighted by everybody, and we just need your approval to give them that access. Any questions?
The last line on this contract about compensation, anybody exchanging any compensation, or is Conterra getting that?
There is no compensation.
I'm just wondering, just looking.
Trying to bring us some money.
We do get compensation for the Intello cellular site. So there is revenue for both Conterra and Fluvanna County Schools. We have a similar situation here at the school board with another carrier bringing in fiber for Intello as well. And because they have to construct a small piece of hardware above ground, there will be a few dollars, and I'm serious when I say a few dollars of revenue for that. But because that's located in the already fenced-in area that's already been given an easement, there's no additional request that has to be approved. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. We are now on to action items. First action item is the approval of the 2015-16 health insurance rates as presented by Mr. Braslauer. Further questions or discussions? Right, call for a motion.